I mean, and that's interesting because I mentioned in my editorial, one of the big issues that I have with, companies like BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street is that they are not only anti-capitalist, but totally anti-democratic. I mean, with common ownership in rival companies, they can influence consumer behavior, they can make our lives harder by forcing these companies to implement these expensive environmental policies that make everything more expensive. I mean, they are this massive investment firm, and they've got a whopping $8.5 trillion USD in assets under management. And to put that into appropriate context, Australia's entire gross domestic product in 2021 was 1.5 trillion. So it's like 8 times bigger than the economy of Australia. It's insane.
Yes.
Its hopelessly woke activist investor CEO Larry Fink has time and time again stated his intentions to use this monolithic war chest to force the hand of company directors in creating policies. Now, Adam, considering that this sort of decision-making directly affects the general public and should realistically, in a free and fair society, be decided at the ballot box, are shareholder activists like Mr. Fink bypassing the democratic process?
Yeah, look, I think they are. I mean, as you point out, they're those massive funds management firms, and you could include the superannuation funds in Australia in that as well. I mean, because they also have a lot of voting power in large Australian companies. And you're quite right. I mean, I think the point you made earlier is really profound, and I don't think that enough people understand it, that these very large corporations all have common ownership in many cases, which is totally different from 30, 40 years ago, 50 years ago, when big companies did not share ownership at all, and they really did compete. I mean, if you go back, say, let's look at the US car industry and Chrysler and Ford and General Motors, they did not share common ownership. And so they really did compete with one another. But the big banks now, the big airlines, I mean, basically any of the big oligopolies in all countries, they're significantly owned by the same entities, basically, and those entities don't really want them to compete. I mean, they want the impression of competition, of course, and they do create that with advertising, but they don't really want vicious competition because that would ultimately hurt the owners. And I think this is it's a very damaging phenomenon, and it leads to a lot of economic rent, as we say, or a lot of excess profits that are made by these very large companies, which would otherwise be going to consumers through lower prices. But instead, they're going to the owners and to the executives, and you're seeing ever more executive compensation and ever more wealth inequality in society. And these are problematic for a democracy.